When I say jazz, what do you think of? Maybe it's improvisation, or jazz hands, or the adjective jazzy, or Utah's basketball team. Associations with jazz are often showy and colorful, and rightfully so. Jazz is fundamentally characterized by improv, where musicians create unscripted melodies and harmonies in the moment. The creative freedom that jazz encourages is what drew me in from a young age, and since then, I've been on a continuing journey of self-expression. So, as is common, my jazz career began with the blues scale. If you don't know, the blues scale is a 7-note musical scale that's at the heart of jazz, rock, and blues improv. It sounds like this. So you can take those notes and play them in basically any order you like, and they'll almost surely sound great. So I'll play something random for you now. I think that sounds pretty sweet. So, of course, it took some time to get the blues scale under my fingers, but soon enough, starting around 6th grade, I was jamming out to blues backing tracks on YouTube like there was no tomorrow. The blues scale was an easy introduction to playing melodies and lines not written on the page, and I absolutely loved it. However, the blues scale only gets you so far in the world of jazz improv. There are many more scales you need to learn in order to fluently improvise over chord changes. I took this next step in a band sleepaway camp in the summer after my 7th grade. And yes, band sleepaway camp didn't earn me a ton of cool points back in middle school, but I still enjoyed it. There, I was pushed to learn my major, minor, and 7th scales in all 12 keys. So lots of this type of practice. And so on. These scales provide the foundation for soloing over more complicated chord progressions, unlocking numerous possibilities. So the next step I took, as is similar to many other jazz musicians, was listening to and transcribing the solos of others. Transcription is a challenging and lengthy process involving listening to a solo over and over and over again, oftentimes at half speed, until you can really hear it, then you can play it on your instrument, and then you can finally write it down. It's challenging, but it really improves your ears as well as your knowledge of rhythm and harmonic structure. It's a deep dive into the improvisation of others, so to better understand improv yourself. Transcription also shows you what phrases or riffs are commonly used, so you can incorporate them into your own playing. For instance, right now I'm transcribing Scott Hamilton's solo on his version of All the Things You Are. His opening line sounds like this. So he plays this over a pretty common progression of chords, meaning I can adapt it and use it in other situations. A possible variation of this phrase might sound like, first I'll play the original. A possible variation might sound like this. You might notice that the tension and resolution in both those phrases are very similar, but the exact notes are not. From this, you can imagine how learning only one phrase actually opens up many other options. So, with a hefty amount of theory and technique practice, jazz musicians can improvise anytime, anywhere. Learning to improvise is often equated to learning a language. Once the necessary vocabulary and grammar are learned, one can speak freely and honestly. Some of the vocabulary I'm talking about are things like this. Or. So they can be longer phrases or just short tidbits, but they're all things that I can easily pull out of my pocket and play in a solo. My journey with the language of jazz still continues today. Although I'm proficient in some aspects of improv, there's still room to grow. For example, take this comparison to the English language. I could be satisfied with saying, I bought food. But it's both more specific and interesting to say, I purchased locally sourced, cruelty-free, free-range organic eggs. The same goes for expanding your jazz vocabulary. Using only the blues scale, I can generally get my point across. using major and minor, diminished and half-diminished and altered scales, I can more accurately express myself. And on top of that, if I have phrases and riffs available at my fingertips, the amount I can say is even greater. So it's really all about building up your language toolbox so that you can fully and accurately express yourself. But language is more than just a vocabulary. Without a strong creative force to arrange music vocab in unique ways, it's easy for solos to become cliché and formulaic. I occasionally notice myself falling into similar patterns of improv, and this comes at the expense of more creative solos. This is my current struggle with jazz, putting creativity first and playing in accordance with my own ideas and sound. This, of course, doesn't come without mistakes, though. Whether it's out-of-key notes or untasteful tone, finding your own sound is a trial and error process. But it's best to view these mistakes not as blemishes, but rather simply as part of your sound. Jazz musicians unanimously value the power of the mistake. Miles Davis even went so far to say that when producers start to make records with all the mistakes in them, then they'll really make jazz records. So for now, I'll keep learning the language of jazz, searching for my own sound. And as I head off this stage, you'll hear a bit of my sound as I play my favorite song, Someday My Prince Will Come. Thank you.